In this California town, Second Amendment is a #1 concern. Needles, California. The blistering sun hung high above the barren landscape, 118 degrees of scatter the critters hot, as Tim Terrell loaded a magazine into his 9mm pistol. He narrowed his eyes, fixing his gaze on a target before a succession of pops cut through the silence. Bullseye. Satisfied, Terrell wiped a bead of sweat off his brow and cocked his head to the side, a coy smile spreading across his slender face. "I don't Mississippi much," he crowed. Today, his attention was focused on a small shooting target. But Terrell has his eye. In June, other city leaders followed the Needles councilman's suggestion and declared this town along the Colorado River a sanctuary city for the Second Amendment. The collision of liberal and conservative buzzwords was meant to be a poke in the eye to the Golden State, the heart of the liberal resistance against a president voters in Needles overwhelmingly supported in 2016. And likely will again. In the coming months, city officials hope to somehow cajole the state to allow Needles and possibly other border towns to be exempt from rules on purchasing ammunition, which would allow people here to buy ammo from out of state, and honor concealed carry permits for people who have obtained them outside California. "For so long we've had to deal with the laws as they are," said Mayor Jeff Williams. "It was time to stand." What Needles wants would seem a tough ask in a state with widespread support for gun control, and never more so than after now familiar mass shootings, like the one that rocked the Northern California town of Gilroy last Sunday. A gunman at the last Monday, California Attorney General Xavier Becerra said the investigation into the shooting may determine that the shooter in Gilroy broke a California law by purchasing the weapon in Nevada and bringing it into California. That weapon could not be sold in California. That weapon cannot, but for officials in Needles, taking such a pro-gun stance offers a means to save a sporadically struggling town. "We do feel neglected," said Rick Daniels, the town's city manager. "It's easy to craft laws with your personal framework in mind, and I don't think there's enough consideration about how those decisions affect small rural towns." Across the Colorado River in Arizona, towns are friendlier to businesses, and boast lower taxes and looser regulations on many consumer items, including firearms, Needles officials argue. This puts the from its rail depot origins dating to 1883 to its place on historic Route 66, Needles, nicknamed the Gateway to California, has long been a stop for travelers on their journey somewhere else. The fictional Joad family in John Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath made Needles their first stop in California. In the 1940s, for a time it was, locals say. Needles was the first place crews swapped out freight trains headed east out of Los Angeles, a big boon for the town at the time. But over the years, the completion of Interstate 40 in the early 1970s also meant travelers were no longer traversing Route 66. They no longer stopped. The Great Recession hit and Needles struggled to recover in a way that feels particular for small towns. LA is just going to survive. They have too many. Needles' only grocery store shuttered in 2014. It was replaced, a handful of businesses still dot Old Route 66 as it winds through the dusty downtown, past a shuttered burger joint and motels turned vacant lots. Weathered craftsman homes with broken windows, still dressed with tattered curtains or boarded up, sit empty. At least one has been. Roughly a quarter of residents live below the poverty line, and as jobs and resources left, so did many people. "You're not going to stay somewhere you can't survive," Terrell said. When cannabis began to emerge as a booming business in the state several years ago, Needles seized the opportunity. Marijuana has been. The city has approved 82 permits for cannabis businesses since 2015. In 2016, the city's 10% cannabis tax, approved by a wide margin of voters in 2012 when marijuana was legal only for medicinal use, added nearly $1.2 million to city coffers last year. That money, at the Wagon Wheel, the city's oldest restaurant, a souvenir shop displays license plates with the city's unofficial nickname, Weedles U, and glasses adorned with marijuana leaves and pot puns. A drinking glass, Vertical Cos, a large cannabis producer headquartered in Agora Hills, has purchased dozens of acres in Needles over the last 2 years. It was drawn to the for so long there was really no economy to speak of in Needles. Now with cannabis, the company has already built a large campus on the edge of town, and has plans to turn an old Kentucky Fried Chicken on Route 66 into a kitchen for cannabis-infused candies and baked goods. The thinking behind the loosening gun laws isn't much different from town officials' view on cannabis. They contend that another contention is that it's illegal for Californians to purchase ammunition in other states. The closest it's just ludicrous to have to go that far to buy a bullet, Williams said. California also does not recognize concealed carry permits issued outside of the state, so residents from Arizona and Nevada have to disarm before they cross the state line. Terrell said in June that he tried to host a barbecue and invited a friend who lives just a few miles away in Open Carry, Arizona. Terrell said the councilman invoked an analogy that would seem irrational to many in a state where support for gun control is strong. It sounds silly that they don't want to take their gun off, but you know what, if Arizona had a law saying that I am not allowed to wear shoes, it would be the same thing, Terrell said. I don't want to take. Needles officials have reached out to other small cities in California to see if they'd be willing to enact similar pro-gun resolutions. In Tehachapi, a city of more than 12,000 nestled between the San Joaquin Valley and the Mojave Desert in Kern County, city officials directed staff to study the feasibility of a similar move. We have big cities around our state that are continuing to dictate to the rest of our smaller cities what they feel we should do, said Tehachapi Councilman Kenneth Hetka. If you're a law-abiding, convincing other small, largely conservative towns to follow the Needles example is one thing. But convincing law, Assemblyman Jay Obernolte, our Big Bear Lake plans to introduce legislation in December that would allow individual cities in California to choose whether they want to acknowledge out-of-state concealed carry permits. He's not sure. This is what we call in the legislature a heavy lift, Obernolte said. It's going to take. Terrell acknowledges the slim odds. But he's determined. If you're not growing, Terrell said, you're dying. Copyright 2019 Los Angeles Times. Visit the Los Angeles Times at distributed by
Raindrops, drop top, smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.